how does a teenager boy like grow up the ranks from starts from $50, right, grows it to 200, and you had like $2 million in revenue, right? How does a teenager boy like grow up the ranks from starts from $50, right, grows it to 200, then 100,000, and then by the end you had like $2 million in revenue, right, like in earnings, right? And then at the end, like at the top of it, you decided to quit, right? Walk us down through that journey briefly, if you can.
Okay, briefly. I started, I wasn't somebody who grew up around gambling, right? Obviously, my parents are very religious, they're Muslim immigrants, and so gambling was something that just was never on my radar, right? So the most poker I ever played, I remember playing 5-card stud with my cousins, without money. And so when I first was introduced to poker, I just knew absolutely nothing, completely alien to me. And I remember playing a game with some friends, and I immediately lost all my money. I didn't know what, not money, chips. I didn't know what calling was, I didn't know what checking was, I didn't know what, I didn't understand any of the terms, and I was so embarrassed that I was, as a teenage boy will be, that I was like, oh, I'm not cool, I should go learn, how to play poker. And when I started learning about it, I learned that there was this generation of poker players that were these young dudes, mostly dudes, who were, in college, and they were studying, statistics and game theory and all these different mathematical concepts in order to become some of the best new generation of poker players in the world. And I thought, that's really cool. That sounds like a video game, and like, I bet I could do that. And so I remember I got my start actually because I was underage, so I couldn't legally play poker. And so this is in the early days of Google image search. And so I remember I Googled an image of a driver's license because there was a website at the time that was running a promotion that if you scan in your driver's license, they'd give you $25 for free to get you to start gambling, right? So you had to like earn your way up by earning it out. And so I found the first image of some little old lady from Maryland who had an uncensored driver's license, sent that in, and that was the only $25 that I've ever deposited into a poker site. And so I started playing the 5-cent, 10-cent games, the 10-cent, 25-cent games. That was all the money I had, so I couldn't lose it. And so I was slowly grinding my way up, game by game, until by the summer I turned $25 into $4,000, and then by the end of the first year I turned it into $100,000. And then I told my dad. And obviously that was a very harrowing, probably the scariest part of that was telling my parents. But eventually they were like, oh, okay, well, shit, because I was making more money than my parents were. And of course I was underage, I was still going to school, and so it was a crazy time. And that ended up becoming my adolescence, was I sort of, my upbringing really, the way that I think about it was at a poker table and in the game of poker. And it's incredible education. Because it just teaches you so much about risk and decision making and mental composure. There's all these skills that I think are incredibly valuable that a poker table teaches you. But it's also incredibly psychologically challenging. It's very isolating. It's very, it sort of takes you off the beaten path, right? Because if you think about all my friends who are these promising young minds who are going into law or medicine, or they're going into technology or whatever, and I was basically like, I dropped out of college at 19 because I was making so much money as a poker player that basically I was just a college dropout. And I studied philosophy and English in school, something totally non-technical, because I was like, why would I study something technical? I'm like making money as a poker player. Like, what does this stuff matter? And so I was very lost. I was very unhappy. And then the thing you mentioned of sort of my fall from grace in the poker world came to a head in this scandal that arose when there was this guy who was a student of mine who ended up cheating a bunch of his friends. And because this guy, he was kind of under my wing, I tried to protect him. And I told people, hey, I think we should resolve this privately. We should have him pay you back. And not tell everybody that this guy cheated. And this scandal ended up blowing up, becoming this huge thing, and it became very clear that I protected him. And that destroyed my reputation in the crypto world. And I was 20 at the time, and so I was way too young to have any instincts about what does one do when something like this happens. And it was one of the most painful things in my life, because that was my entire identity, was just being a poker player. It was all I'd ever done. It was the only thing I was good at. It was the only thing anyone ever valued from me as a human being. And feeling that suddenly get stripped away from me, it taught me so much about the importance of honesty. You know, like I was so afraid, and I was like, oh, if people find this out, it's going to be terrible for me. It's going to be terrible for this guy. It's going to be terrible for everybody who's around us. And that's been a huge lesson for me. And the other thing that it really taught me was self-reliance. Because after that episode, I was just like, okay, you know, I was already disillusioned with poker. You know, I knew that I wasn't somebody who wanted to be a poker player for the rest of my life. And so it forced me to leave all of that behind and to go and try to create like a real identity for myself and a real goal of what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be, away from the thing that I had made money from.
Right.
And so when I quit poker, I was just, like I said, I was just a college dropout.
Yeah.
And I had this immensely difficult period of searching to try to find out what I wanted to do with my life and what motivated me and what I really wanted as a human being. And that's a big part of the reason why I gave away a lot of the money that I made as a poker player. Started over with $10,000 and realized that the only way that I was going to become anybody was if I had to, was if I had no other option but to become somebody.
Right.
And so I gave away I wrote that book, gave away my money, and then started over, deciding that eventually I wanted to go into the tech industry.